the leader, because he's got a meeting at 4 o'clock that he needs relevant people at. So we've got a way to go. Right. We have no Amelia today, but she is watching or listening. So hello, Amelia, and welcome to the councillors and officers who are online, or some who's got he's up there and he's here. Hello, Steve. So if anybody's got a problem, we have Steve or Chris here to assist us. Right, into the meeting itself. So item 1, apologies for absence, please, Cathy.
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Blackman, Councillor Coulson and Councillor Turnbull, and Councillor Moody is joining us via Teams. Thank you. Ooh. Can you hear me?
No, it needs to be. Sorry, it needs to be a bit nearer to you.
Can you hear me? Right. We have apologies from Councillor Blackman, Councillor Coulson, Councillor Turnbull, and Councillor Moody is joining via Teams. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kemp, please.
Apologies, but we don't, I think a few of us don't know who Amelia is, and would it be possible for you to describe the people you're talking about when you mentioned somebody? Thank you.
Miss Bolter, who's Amelia up there, was our Cathy. She was assisting at the meetings for about 6 months, but she's been taken to the dark side called South Hams. And Cathy, everybody knows, don't they? Yes? Right. Okay, right. Moving on, item 2, confirmation of minutes. Everyone happy there?
Can I just say something?
Yes, you may.
Just one thing from me. On page 3, it says we would look at the grass cutting cycle following the hay fever complaint. It's just the previous report said there was no complaints, but I mean, I just mentioned that somebody had spoken to me about hay fever, but it doesn't mean we need to look at this cutting cycle necessarily.
That can be indicated back in the minutes, Cathy, please. Right, everybody happy that I sign those minutes? Oh, afternoon, Councillor Renders.
Apologies for being late, Chair.
That's all righty. Right, everybody's happy that those minutes, true and correct record. Yep, I'll sign those at the end of the meeting. Declarations of interest, everybody knows how to declare if and when they need to, please do so. Moving on to 4, urgent business. I have no urgent business. Mr Molyneux?
No urgent business, Chair.
Thank you. Public forum, we have no requests. So that leads us nicely on to item 6, the NFU involvement in Devon Carbon Plan, and Alex Stevens, who is the Regional Policy Manager of the NFU, is here to speak to us, and Alex is with the red tie. Your time is yours now, Alex, please.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? Down the line and everything like that. Brilliant. I'll be quite quick because I know I've got 15 minutes followed by some questions, but I did want to just explain a little bit about the NFU for those who may not be so clear on who we are and what we do. So the NFU is a trade association, so it's not a union in that sort of traditional sense. It represents the industry. We've got about 45,000 members, and in Devon we have just shy of about 3,000. So I work as part of the Southwest region, so the region for me is Gloucestershire down to Cornwall, and in that region we've got about 9,500 members, representing all sectors of agriculture, from small producers doing market gardening schemes and selling vegetables in boxes through to large, multi-thousand hectare businesses. And to give an idea of the kind of people that we represent, so our members are generally small family farms. So typically our average member is about 120-ish acres. They are family partnerships, and usually there's some livestock and some grass growing involved. So that's kind of where we are, and that's pretty typical for the area that we're sitting in at the moment. I'm going to talk a little bit about the NFU's involvement with sort of climate emergency response and net zero, and some of our aspirations around net zero. There are some very techie slides, so for anyone who had them emailed around, there's some stuff in there that I'm not even going to touch on today, because I think it would be a meeting in itself to work out things like carbon trading and emerging markets for biodiversity, net gain, and all that kind of stuff. So it's worth knowing about. I'm happy to do it another day, but I think for now I'll keep to the headlines and the basics, and happy to pick up anything further in questioning if you'd like. Just to say as well, you do have more local representation than me. So we have a group secretary network who are based in NFU mutual offices around the county, and you also have a county advisor. He's a chap called Andrew Butler, and Andrew sits on the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group, which has been our route really to feed into to actions within the county on carbon. From a farming perspective. So that's how we've done that, and that's been our route in. But equally, we've invited representation from the County Council, from the LEPs and from others to NFU meetings in the county. We also have quite a lot of representation on Heart of the Southwest LEP as well, in the various subgroups, and any of you that are involved in Heart of the Southwest know they're flipping good at subgroups. So we try and get involved in those as much as we can, to fly the flag for farming. And my role really, so I am a lobbyist first and foremost, and I am very much also a generalist. So again, that's my way of saying if you ask anything too techie, I may well not know the answer. But my role principally is stakeholder engagement and working with policymakers. So on a Friday, I'm usually out somewhere on a farm with an MP, talking about farming, talking about all the good things that are going on around us, and flying the flag for domestic food production and for the environmental good that farming can deliver, as well as addressing some of the stuff that's not so good that we need to put right and the industry needs to work on. I don't need to talk to you about net zero really, because I think you probably all know what it is and what we're aiming at. Government obviously have a 2050 target, and NFU decided that actually as farming PLC we could get ahead of the game there, and we could work towards a 2040 target. The reason for that being farming is pretty uniquely placed to sequester carbon, as well as having more of an opportunity than most industries to generate things like renewable energy. And also, I think the biggest gains in terms of working towards net zero for farming is actually just being more efficient and working on productivity measures. I'll talk about those in a moment. So I suppose pictorially, and this might look a bit tricky on the screen for those of you who are down the line. But again, hopefully you've got copies of this, and if not, you can find it all on the NFU website, and I'll leave some papers behind as well. Basically, farming is quite uniquely placed in terms of having that cycle of production where we have the ability to sequester carbon into soils. That ability isn't the same every year, and it doesn't go on forever, but there's certainly scope to do that. We have the ability to improve our biodiversity, and I think it's worth keeping in mind that when we talk about net zero and when we talk about working towards reducing our carbon impact, actually there are two sides of the same coin at play here in terms of reducing that impact, but also improving the environment around us and the habitat which farmers are looking after as well. So keep all that in mind, because the two don't always go together. And just as an example, the easiest thing we could do, probably if we're talking about sequestration, is to plant lots of really fast-growing grasses and trees. But actually that would lead to a sort of monoculture, which wouldn't be particularly good for the environment in terms of wildlife and things. So it's about balance, equally balancing into that, and most important for our members is food production, and particularly since events of the last, well, almost exactly a year now, isn't it, for Ukraine, domestic food production and domestic energy production have become increasingly important for the government agenda. So we're based really on 3 pillars in terms of how we're going to do this. So it's about becoming more efficient as farm businesses and being efficient with the inputs that we have. So any of you who are economists probably know about things like total factor productivity. So that's about using every input you have in the farm business to produce as many outputs as you can in the most efficient way. It's not about producing more, it's about producing well with the inputs that you're using. Second of all on the list there, we've got carbon storage measures. And I think it's probably fair to say that in this part of the world where we have lots of ground that's constantly covered in grass and only really gets organic type fertilisers, farmyard manures, that sort of thing, we're probably sequestering quite a bit of carbon already, and there's probably quite a lot already locked up. In areas where production is a little more intensive or involves disturbing the ground a bit more, so things like ploughing, that kind of stuff, then more carbon is released. But it is worth also keeping in mind that often those soils are the most productive as well, so there is a trade-off in terms of the food that's being produced for the carbon that's being stored. The third element, and actually the trickiest one to get a handle on, and the one that I'm going to gloss over a little bit in terms of how the markets work, is generating renewable energy and also trading things like carbon. So that could be with property developers who are looking to offset, airports, whoever it might be. The market is emerging. There are options out there for farmers, but it's mightily complicated. And if you know anybody that's wanting to enter that market, please encourage them to seek legal advice on anything. And if they're an FU member, they can get a contract checking service free of charge, and we'll look through things for them. So our journey to net zero, I think, is looking at every element of the farm business, and I hope that you guys can encourage that as well for farmers in the area. That might be about efficiency, as I've said, but it could also be about farming in a different way. Maybe that's about improving the infrastructure on farm to make you more efficient, so you may well see more applications for things like planning permission on slurry storage, diversifying to underpin income to farm in a different way, or just to improve buildings for things like livestock ventilation and all that sort of thing, which ultimately, if they mean that you're producing a finished product a little bit quicker with less inputs, then that works towards net zero and helps to reduce carbon within the county and within the district, borough. We've been asking farmers to sign up for our net zero pledge. This is an old slide, but actually the league table is still the same. That Devon, sorry, am I too loud? Sorry. I took it too seriously when I was told to put it near. So we're, Devon is really high up the league table in terms of farmers who are pledging to do things. We're well into the hundreds now, but farmers are pledging just simple actions on farm that can make a real difference. So the obvious things are, on a livestock farm, for example, on a dairy farm, if you can reduce your calving intervals, so if you're effectively reducing the amount of time between the cow getting in calve and her productive life, then that improves output and reduces carbon. Equally, if you look after your cows really well and they live a healthy, long and happy life, then that makes them more efficient as well. So all these things are really important and all lead to reducing carbon in the local economy. The challenge, I think, for farmers, and the one area that really puts people off taking actions, is actually, what is my baseline data now? Who do I trust? Who can tell me how much carbon is already locked up on my farm? Who can tell me how much I have the ability to continue to sequester? And how do I find out that information? There are good tools out there. So the Farm Carbon Toolkit is one of them, which assesses not just the farm activity, but also the ability of your soils to absorb carbon as well and to lock up carbon. But it's a little bit of a challenging area, because it might be that you get that baseline data for your farm, but maybe your milk buyer or your livestock processor or your grain buyer wants to use a different tool or wants to measure it in a different way. Or perhaps, and this is the worst thing that farmers are most afraid of, that puts them off of doing any baseline data, that somebody else is going to benefit from that data. So I do all the work, I go out, I find out the carbon footprint of my farm, and Tesco benefit or Sainsbury's benefit because they capture it, and if they find out that I'm producing really efficiently, they'll want that data for themselves and they'll want it as a marketing tool. And the problem that we end up with is that we have a kind of stalemate where farmers start that process, worry about whether the data is accurate, and then end up doing nothing. And again, a simple action for farmers that I hope you guys can promote is that actually knowing some baseline data gives you something to work with, helps to highlight areas where you can improve and become more carbon efficient, more resource efficient, and that's also about other greenhouse gases as well, methane and things like that. And when you know that, you can start to take little steps and do something, because any action is better than no action. I think I'm just going to very briefly mention carbon sequestration and storage, but I also wanted to flag some things we've been doing to support our members. So obviously growing things is important, and I'll show you a slide in a moment about how hedges can help with that. We've also been working with the Woodland Trust on a tree planting scheme. Sorry. We've been working with the Woodland Trust on a tree planting scheme where we have given out in the last 2 weeks 115,000 trees to members. We've given them instructions on how and where to plant, and they're doing lovely stuff like hedgerow infill where there's gaps, extending hedges a little bit, all sorts of small steps that can make a big difference. And I'll show you a bit more about hedges in a minute. I should have trusted my voice a bit more, shouldn't I, and not brought the microphone so close. Sorry about that. Okay. Okay, the blooming system, yeah. So, voluntary offsetting market. So, I've said that I'm not going to talk about markets a lot, and I'm not going to because it's a minefield. But I just wanted to highlight that this doesn't just apply to carbon offsetting. More and more, and any of you who've got contacts in Somerset or Dorset will probably know about phosphate trading, nitrate trading, all sorts of other things that are going on, which are a real challenge to understand and can involve signing land up for agreements for 80 years plus, which is terrifying if you've got a family farm and you're hoping to pass it to the next generation. And if you're a tenant farmer, you're probably out of that market altogether, because 80 years, that's not how tenancies work. So there is some real challenge around markets when it comes to locking land up and taking land effectively out of production. Also implications on things like inheritance tax and things like that. But again, that's a rabbit hole that I'm not going to dive down. So there are uncertainties, there are risks, but we're really encouraging farmers to take part in as many schemes as they can that reduce their impact, to take part in the government schemes around sustainable farming incentive under the sort of banner of ELM, which is environmental land management, which help to make businesses more efficient, help to improve habitat, but also importantly reduce impact as well in production. That's been, I think, really accelerated. The last 20 years or so, I think farmers have become way more savvy about using things like manufactured nitrogen fertilizers, how they apply slurries and manures to the ground, when they decide to plant and how they plant. So you probably notice that we don't see as much ploughing as we used to. We see a lot more what we call minimum tillage. So that's direct planting of seeds and things. And that has an impact, that makes a difference, and it's about being efficient, and it just so happens that the outcome of that is at the same time you're reducing your carbon impact, so it's win-win really. I think we've got scope for more woodland creation, but again I think the trade-off is understanding what land you take out of production, and I don't want to get too kind of political with some schemes that are out there, but there are large landlords who are planting up woodlands on grade 1 agricultural land, and that's not going down massively well with some people. But equally, there are large areas of land where it would be appropriate to have more woodland, or perhaps solar in the right place, that kind of thing, which can make a difference to carbon. I'm going to skip through some of these bits because I've talked about them already, and I'm conscious of time. I mentioned trees. Trees are really important in this. There are government targets around tree planting, and there are also lots of grants out there for farmers to make use of when it comes to tree planting. So definitely advise farmers to take part in those schemes, to understand the best places and the best ways to plant trees, but also to follow the best practice in doing it. Last summer was very dry, and lots of people that planted small trees found that they had to work incredibly hard to keep them alive. So again, these things always have a trade-off, and there are always pros and cons behind it. Hedgerows, so I mentioned them a few times, and we are blessed in Devon to have lots of hedges. The best hedges anywhere in the country, and I am happy to say that down in Cornwall, where they'll tell me the Cornish banks are much better. But our hedges are, if you picture them, you probably imagine a green hedge with a bank underneath, with trees, mature trees every sort of 20 metres or so, perhaps even more than that, and quite thick growth. If we were to increase the size of hedges by 20%, so that could be incremental cutting, where you just let the hedge get a little bit longer and taller each year. Obviously, there are factors around highways which are obvious, but where you can do so, to do that, it makes a real difference, because the taller the hedge, the deeper the roots and the more ability to sequester carbon. So that's something that can be encouraged. Extending the sizes, the length of hedges where appropriate, filling in gaps in hedges, all these things make a real difference. And I think we'll see more farmers doing it, but equally they want to make sure they're rewarded for doing it as well. And renewables is a challenging one, so we do lots of work with our members on advising them on renewables. We've got a company that we purchased a few years ago, which we've rebranded as NFU Energy. They advise on everything from getting an electric contract through to the business of putting in renewables and getting grid connections and all that kind of stuff. It's a difficult thing to do, and down here grid connections are hard to come by, but they are a real, I think, where you can offset the energy used on farm, particularly heavy users like poultry units and dairy units. That has to be a win-win, and I think we need to find more ways to unlock access to the grid to be able to do that. We've taken this message to politicians at the highest level. We take stands at all the main party conferences. We've got our own conference next week that's going to have Keir Starmer as a headline speaker. We've got the Ag Minister, we've got the Secretary of State coming. So these messages around how we can achieve net zero and what we can do to really ensure that farming is fit for the future are being heard at the highest level and are being broadcast at the highest level. But policy making isn't just a national thing. You guys know, because you're doing it all the time, that it happens locally. So I think understanding some of these requests, some of these particularly planning requests that come through, and how they can help to make a farm more efficient are really useful. And if anyone wants to go out onto farm, I can arrange that, happy to do it. I'll leave some business cards at the end so that we can make that happen for you. I'm going to skip through because I'm very conscious of time. You've had some links sent through for a document for local authorities. So again, use that. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Right, because I'm sure there's people who've got questions for you. See, look, hands are up. Councillor Kemp, please.
Thank you. I know that we had a short talk beforehand, and what I was asking you in effect was, where do you see the future of agriculture in the area? So maybe I can change that question slightly. Do you see a visible change in the agricultural landscape over the next 50 years?
It's interesting, because if you'd asked me straight after the Brexit vote, I would have said yes, we're going to see production of more things that we import at the moment. So things like salad crops in glass houses, all that kind of stuff. And that's happened to some extent, but not as much as I thought it would. I think we'll see farming change. I think we'll see more land ownership outside of agriculture. Particularly, I mean, there are inheritance tax reasons for doing that, but also offsetting other business activity and being able to sequester carbon and things. So we'll see a lot more investment in land from outside of agriculture. We're seeing some really innovative agreements between farmers who are looking to exit the industry, either because they're wanting to retire, they're fed up with bureaucracy and red tape, whatever it might be, and they're finding ways to work with younger entrants by putting in farm managers or doing contract farming agreements or share farming agreements, profit shares, that kind of thing. So we'll see that changing. I think we'll see the areas that are most productive farmed even more productively. And I think we'll see the areas that are a bit less productive farmed in a ever more sensitive way.
Councillor Hayworth, please.
just wondering whether you could ask the farmers at your meeting next week whether they could try and think a bit more positively about, you know, the ELM payment for access. West Devon has a very real interest in increasing active travel. It's difficult for farmers. The immediate issues of privacy, security, you know, we all have our own bit of turf and we're all, you know, anxious to protect it. But if you could, you know, kind of launch the idea a bit and try and persuade them that it might actually improve their security, reduce the attacks on animals. You know, if you put decent hedging, the way South Strand recommends it, you can have a track going across your field, and now you don't have dogs chasing your sheep, you have the dogs channeled through. You know, anyway, that's what I would be very grateful if you'd do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been in the news a little bit lately around Dartmoor, and I think, again, you know, it shows that challenge between agriculture and money coming into agriculture from outside and different aspirations and understandings of what the land can be used for. I would hope that any farmer who's wanting to, particularly to diversify their income, would see this as a win-win, because, you know, there's a captive market out there for all sorts of other alternative land uses, as well as that can get, you know, work hand in hand with core agriculture. So I'm very happy to take that message back and happy to encourage people to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel, please.
Thank you. That was really interesting to hear the progress that's been made, and especially about the improved efficiency. And I want to ask about the future. As I don't think the UK has ever been self-sufficient in food productivity, and do you think there's a future where we could be coming towards that? Or no? Do you think there's a future where we could be heading towards that, including technological results like vat-grown meat, and as you were mentioning, salads grown in polytunnels and things? And just do you think that's going to be necessarily be a plant-based future, or do you think there's always going to be room for meat production? Thank you.
I think, I mean, plant-based foods and meat, you know, we're in a livestock area that grows grass really, really well. And actually, when it's done in a sensitive way, can sequester carbon and can be part of a mixed farming system, because organic manures are pretty key to that. And so it is a challenge to get that balance right. I would personally advocate, you know, and it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we're trying to produce food at every price point. And people really, you know, some people will really struggle to afford good quality food. But I think if we can get to a point where people are discerning about what they buy, perhaps willing to put a little bit bigger proportion of their, you know, their weekly spend towards food as opposed to maybe other things, then we can definitely achieve that. I don't think we'll make great strides into more self-sufficiency on food. We're about 2/3 of, you know, in terms of the sort of the temperate things that we can realistically produce here cost effectively, we've hovered around the sort of 2/3 mark for quite a while. And I think we'll struggle to get beyond that. But what we can do is produce the things that we are doing more efficiently to get the price point down, and look at other services like, you know, energy from the land, all that kind of stuff, to make, you know, the economy more self-sufficient, which isn't just about food. So that's the trade-off, really.
I have Councillor Moody next, then Councillor Spettigue, and I'm afraid that's it timing-wise for anyone.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Yes, really just based on the last question, is that what I have been thinking is that the livestock producing farmers, how are they looking towards the future with it seems to me that the advertisements are on television all the time about plant-based food and replacing some meat with with plant protein. Are farmers sort of really looking towards the future for how they're going to survive should that trend increase? You know, there's got to be a tipping point somewhere. How is that going to affect farmers? And also, what is the NFU doing to work with farmers to see what the future is?
That's a biggie. So we don't tell farmers how to farm, but we try to highlight the market dynamics so that they can make the best possible decisions for their own businesses. If you look at the greenhouse gas emissions from beef production, or from any red meat production really, the UK average is less than 50% of the global average. So you could make a case for if meat consumption stayed as it is, actually, should we be exporting more and trying to encourage production that's predominantly, but not completely, grass-based, that is more efficient, that uses breeds that convert energy to protein more efficiently. And if you weigh up plant-based alternatives kilo for kilo in terms of nutrient value, red meat outperforms them almost every time. But it's challenging to, I think we're not going to row against having a balanced diet. That's really important, and people need to make informed decisions about what they eat. And UK farming has to adapt to that, but also think of its, where it sits in a global market to be able to balance, those higher value things that we can produce in a sustainable way, to sell them overseas, to look for high alternative markets. To keep farmers profitable. So I think it's balance is probably the obvious answer, but we can certainly do all of that. And I really feel like Devon particularly, if you look at it as one big mixed farm, we do a bit of everything in Devon, and that's the way that a diet should look. That's the way that I think a healthy farming system should look. And while farmers are increasingly specialising in one sector, across a county like this, where we are so diverse, I think we've got a lot to be proud of.
Thank you.
Councillor Spettigue, please.
Hi, Alex. I've got two questions. So I'll ask them together because you might be able to answer them together. And my first question is, can you please describe to us the degree of involvement that the NFU has had in terms of consultation for the Devon Carbon Plan? And the second question is, how well aligned do you think the values of the NFU are with the principles of the Devon Carbon Plan?
That's a good one. As I said at the beginning, so we had a place on the Devon Climate Emergency Response Group, which has fed into this plan. And I have felt like at times it's felt like an anti-farming plan to some extent, particularly with the way that livestock production is or has been portrayed. While there has been some balance in terms of understanding that actually shortening supply chains is good for the economy and good for carbon, local business is good as well. That's been a positive. Yet it's felt like sometimes the science and the data that we've provided and have input into the process hasn't. I think it's been listened to, but to some extent there've been some blinkers out there in terms of how that's understood and portrayed. So I think we have had input. We've had a chance to shape things as they've been developed as well through our involvement on the LEP. But it's been challenging to, I guess, we've had a foot in the door, certainly, but, we probably could have had a bit more of an opportunity to walk the supply chain with people, to show people what food production looks like, in 2023, all that kind of stuff. So it's been good, but not amazing.
Chair, may I ask a quick supplementary question, please? Thank you. On that basis, then, on that basis, do you think the benefits of reducing carbon outweigh, or do they not outweigh the impact of climate change on farming versus not applying the Devon carbon plan? If that makes sense.
It does make sense. Food production will always have an impact, and it's about mitigating that. So I think I wouldn't say the benefits of the carbon plan outweigh or fly in the face of productive farming. I think the two can definitely be done together. You haven't got to drive very far to see farms that are underinvested, that could be much more efficient, that are working with old buildings, that are not using the latest technology. So I think where we can use the carbon plan to influence infrastructure grants, policy change to make food production more efficient, then that would be a really good thing.
That's it. Thank you.
That is it, isn't it? Right. Thank you very much indeed, Alex, for coming along today. It's been much appreciated. I will ask the officers to send out the 2 presentations that you sent to members so they can look at them. I've just got a question for the leader as he sat here. Councillor Jury, when we move into our next council, do we think we should have, with one of the hub members, a specialism of farming? Because we don't seem to have anybody like that. We have a few farmers and one who's not here. It doesn't fall under a specialism. So we have some farmers that are very vocal, but actually I think we could improve upon that as a council.
Thank you, Chair. I think that would be a question for the new council and the leader at that time. My view is that farming at present is covered in part by the lead member for the economy, and it's a really important part of our economy, and that reflects its status there. And I think there are aspects of farming that fall within the portfolio for the natural environment as well. So, recognising that farmers are very important custodians of the natural landscape. So I don't think I can answer that question now. I think it would be a question perhaps with the increasing importance of this area for the new council to consider.
Thank you very much, Alex. If I could ask you now if you'd like to vacate your seat, please. Becca. Is it just Becca, Claire, Chris, and is Ian coming forward? Where's Councillor Richards? Oh, there he is. No, no. I've even had your job title written down for me as I saw you sat there. Yeah, you. Right. Moving on, please, members. We have our new inspector for our area, but I'm not sure. Do you cover Oakhampton, Chris? Yes. All right, so this is our new inspector, Inspector Chris Conway. So it's lovely for you to be here to meet members, and thank you very much for changing your very busy morning to be able to speed down the motorway to get back to us. Hopefully you weren't speeding. Hopefully everybody knows Becca. Becca Hewitt. She is the chairman of the Community Safety Partnership and also the lead officer for the Community Safety Partnership of the South Devon and Dartmoor CSP. Becca's been with the council now, I think we worked it out earlier, about 25 years, and she's extremely experienced in what she says. And we have Claire, who is the Community Safety Officer for South Hams and West Devon. And the boss man's at the back, Ian Luscombe, who we all know. Right, Becca. Now, could you please all have your listening ears on, because as you know, Becca can talk at speed. Becca, I know what time it is now, so you've got your extra time that you need, okay? Yeah, and then 25 minutes for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Councillor Ewings, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I've got my microphone there, but you can hear me okay. Good. I will try and keep my pace appropriate, but just wave at me if I'm going way too fast. So thank you very much for allowing us to come this afternoon. I'm going to present the report, and then I've got Inspector Conway and Claire with me for any difficult questions you want to pose this afternoon, and I'll pick off the easy ones. But I'm just going to take through the report. I appreciate most of you will have had a chance to read it, but I just want some bits to highlight to you, if that's okay. So a reminder at the start of the report that it's a statutory obligation that we come to you annually to allow you to overview and scrutinise the work of the Community Safety Partnership, and very clearly your Community Safety Partnership and the work that we're doing to prevent crime. And we're always very pleased to welcome the local senior police officer to come and take any questions. But just as a reminder, that's in questions in relation to the work of the police in the partnership arrangements, not just within the council, the constabulary's own work in relation to policing. That can be done through the Police and Crime Panel. So, as Councillor Ewings has said, the partnership is across the 3 districts of Teignbridge, Southampton and West Devon, which has been operating in that way since 2007, since time began for the partnership. And we also work collaboratively across Devon and indeed the whole peninsula, where it's appropriate for really our challenging areas of crime that we can talk about in more of that geography. But your CSP is here for you for your local response to the challenges of community safety, and we feel it's really appropriate to have our local networks in our areas. So in relation to how we work and our outcomes and outputs, we every year we have a priority setting meeting. Our next one is on the 1st of March, where we will be meeting within Southampton Council Chamber, and we will set our priorities for the year. We are very much an intelligence-led partnership, so we look at the strategic assessment, which looks at the risk of threat, risk and harm in our communities. We look back at the data that we're aware of from a host of agencies telling us what those risks are, but we also look forward to what we think those threats will be, and that's how we set our priorities. And again, it's very important to us that we're not just using that data, we're using the local knowledge of the experts in the room who know our communities. So that's why we're so pleased that we always have really good attendance at those, because that sets our plan going forward. And out of that, we produce our local delivery plan. The next section of my report talks about the key achievements of the partnership, initially of the partnership as a whole, and then we've picked out some elements specifically in relation to West Devon for you councillors. So what we've been doing in the last year is a bit of a change, and we've been really focusing in preparation for the serious violence duty, which we knew was coming in legislation at the end of January this year, and it has indeed come in for us as a community safety partnership. And we looked at where our real risks were in relation to violence prevention. And for us, there's some really key concerns around violence against women and girls. So that's been a focus of our partnership for the last 12 months, and we're working very hard on some projects, and you'll see that theme through a number of our conversations this afternoon. We also have a quarterly partnership which is co-chaired by Claire and the Domestic Abuse Partnership, and that's around looking specifically at sexual violence and domestic violence and abuse. So that's a really strong network with lots of members that meet regularly to get together and talk about the challenges in our local area to try and increase confidence in our communities to report and to work with the different partners. And we're really pleased with the outcome levels that is achieved, particularly in Chris's policing area, for positive outcomes from domestic abuse cases that are reported to the police. I also want to just pick out another thing that is in that section around sexual violence, domestic violence and abuse, and that's we are working very, it's a real priority of our partnership to prevent as early as we can and to work with young people as early as we can around things like healthy relationships. And one of those things is around sexism and misogyny and trying to change some of that culture. So we've got a presentation which went into 9 secondary schools across the area, across the patch, and we actually had 1,600 young people see that. And it's a way of using theatre to really pick up some really challenging issues and to encourage young people to speak out if they're uncomfortable, and particularly speak out to their peers if they're behaving in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable. Those of you that have listened to me for several years, and there's many of you around the table who've had to listen to me for several years, you'll know that exploitation has been a really strong theme of the partnership over the last few years. That continues, and the exploitation prevention toolkit that we were part of creating, which again we've presented to members in this chamber before, we are still pushing out to help people understand the different forms of exploitation, how to spot it, and most importantly, how to report it. We do not want exploitation in the communities in West Devon, and we will do everything we can in partnership to address that. And one of those forms of exploitation and risk of harm is dangerous drugs networks and county lines. So we continue to try and engage with different partners around the reality of what that looks like in our communities and how we can strengthen our communities against it. And again, I spoke to you last year, we have seen county lines within West Devon, and we don't want them here, and we want to make our communities more resilient to them. So that's ongoing work that we will continue to do, and we put a big focus on that with education, teachers and governors last year. I'm going to talk a little bit now around changes in youth culture. And again, one of the things that we do is around advocating for issues that we see emerging in our community. And one of those that we've majored on in the last year is around vaping. And young people vaping, and I'm sure you've seen it in your own communities where young people are vaping who are likely not to have taken up smoking. So we're concerned around the health impacts of that, but actually we're also concerned around the community safety impacts. We've got young people in our schools who are too frightened to go to the toilet because the toilets are being used for vaping. And it's causing antisocial behaviour in our schools. And we've also got some very entrepreneurial young people who are buying them online and selling them to other young people. They are age-restricted products. They are not to be used by children. And the research around the impact of that isn't there. But there was some stuff in the national press around how that's increased. So our role as a community safety partnership is to have strong links with our schools across the whole of our partnership area to be able to advocate on their behalf, to get that data, to speak to public health. And as a result of the work we did, we actually appeared in a number of national media outlets, including Sunday Times articles, and we were actually able to influence Devon County Council in putting in services to help young people and support young people moving away from vaping. So that's an example of us as advocates. I've already mentioned around secondary schools, we meet regularly with secondary schools, and it's our intention this year to expand that working relationship that's so beneficial in secondary with primary, because again, we want to get in as early as we can with our prevention activity. Something else that I muted last time, but we've developed much more, is a number of you will have known, it was in the press, over the period of lockdown, where people weren't going overseas, and we saw different users on Dartmoor National Park. They were people who weren't as familiar with the countryside code, who were acting in ways that we weren't used to people acting on Dartmoor. So we saw more antisocial behaviour, we saw more conflict, and we saw some more challenge, and we actually saw some more environmental damage to our park landscape. We work really closely with the Park Authority, and we have been able to use our local authority antisocial behaviour powers to support the park in being able to address that antisocial behaviour. I had a review meeting with Park recently, and that's been really positive, and I'm delighted to say we haven't had to do one enforcement letter, because being able to talk through the education and with the threat of enforcement, people have engaged and complied. So that has been a really positive exercise. We've got our annual forum coming up. It's a bit of a plug. I know I'm supposed to be talking about what's happened in the past, and we did have our forum last March. We've got our next one on the 22nd of March this year. I've got 120 people booked on, but please do find the link and come along. And at that, we will be giving a bit more detail, and you'll be hearing from lots of other people other than me about what the CSP has delivered in the last 12 months. Next, members, I want to highlight to your attention a really exciting, innovative piece of work that we've been developing, that Claire's been really strong on leading with me, around educating parents about the realities of what's happening in our communities, the risks our young people face, not to give them fear, but to build more resilience in our communities against the risks. And they are the risks that they're drug and alcohol, healthy relationships, bullying, online safety, a whole host. And we've created a package, which is an online package, which we deliver in in 3 sessions directly to parents. We don't call it a parenting course, we talk it about, it's Let's Talk. It's tips and techniques on a range of issues. We have had, I'm absolutely delighted to say, 3,107 engagements with parents online over the last year. Parents are desperate to understand the risks that their young people face, and they're even more desperate to work out how they can support their young people. As a community safety partnership, we absolutely advocate that every parent wants the best for their child. They don't necessarily have the knowledge or skills or resources at that moment in time to necessarily do it. But I've never met a parent who doesn't want the best for their child. So what we're about is giving them the information, directing them to support services, and taking it back to those basic techniques of listening and communicating to your child to reduce their risk in the community, to build their resilience. You'll see from the charts, what started off in lowly little South Devon has actually gone international. We've had people joining us from all over the world, and we've got a huge amount of interest in developing that. I've put some quotes in there as well for members to read from parents. The feedback from parents has been absolutely overwhelming around not feeling so isolated, and particularly during the COVID pandemic, parents felt very isolated. There was lots of tension within family homes, and this has given people a bit of an outlet. So it's been really positive. So we're at the moment delivering it across the whole of the peninsula. We're actually delivering it across the whole of the world, and on the 9th of March we're bringing a whole host of different professionals together in a room to look at how we can really maximise something that we know is exciting, that we know is good. How can we harness it? I will be scouting for lots of money to try and develop it as well to all sorts of different places, so that we can take that forward and continue to strengthen our parents and build resilience in our young people. Section 3.3 of the report talks a little bit about achievements specific to West Devon. The regular Tavistock and Oakhampton Matters meetings have been picked up by Inspector Conway and Claire and are continuing, and you may want to ask some questions about that, I'm not sure, in the future, but just wanted to mention those. There's some antisocial behaviour achievements there, which I'm not going to go into in detail. They're there for your information. And the other thing I just wanted to pick up is in relation to options available and consideration of risk. I've talked very much about the strategic assessment. I've talked about how we set out our priorities at the end of March, and then we set our delivery plan, and that's a very public plan for anybody to look at. We have a good track record of achieving mostly up to 90% of our plan, and being very clear to members if we haven't achieved something, why that is. However, communities are very dynamic, risk is very dynamic, and we have to ensure that as a community safety partnership, we respond to that dynamic risk and that dynamic threat. And that was particularly true within the COVID pandemic. You've heard about it with the vaping. It's true with the cost of living. And that isn't because in a cost of living crisis, people turn to crime, because we don't see the evidence of that. If you're not a criminal before a cost of living crisis, it's very unlikely you will turn to be, but there are more outlets for stolen goods, and there are other things that we can see that can impact on our communities. So it's really important that we keep in regular contact with Chris and his teams and with the rider force, that we also keep in contact with health colleagues, with school colleagues, with our whole kind of network through the Community Safety Partnership, to be really minded of what those threats are, so that we can get ahead of the curve and try and be as responsive as possible. That's a very quick run through, and I think I've even done it under time, Chair,
I'm really
which
impressed.
is a miracle.
I'm very impressed, Becca. Thank you very much for that, Becca. As ever, absolutely brilliant. I just put in a note, because Mr. Gardner, our officer, was saying, can you get her just to lean back a bit? And I was going, I've listened to her for 18 years, you can't interrupt her. Right, questions please. Councillor Kemp first.
Thank you, Chairman. very interested in, and by the way, wonderful talk, thank you, as usual,
really excellent.
Absolutely excellent. But I was particularly interested in your Let's Talk project. Now, the reason for that is that a local area I know is just beginning to have problems with heavy drug use. They're finding the paraphernalia, and the local parents, town council don't actually know anything about it. It is something totally new to them. And the idea that there is a way of approaching this that doesn't criminalise the children, doesn't worry the parents, and yet allows conversations is something I'm very interested in getting hold of. How can we bring that to our local area?
So first of all, have a chat to us outside the meeting, have a chat to Claire, and we can very quickly pull something together with the appropriate police staff as well to get an understanding of what the reality is of that situation. One of the challenges that we've got is that the environment of young people and substance misuse is changing all the time. So I've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon looking at the emergence that we've seen in our area, and West Devon is one of those areas around ketamine use. So ketamine is a very specific type of drug that we are seeing young people using where they may have used cannabis. So it's all around information gathering. It is not around criminalising young people. It is around engagement. It's around education. We would love to work with the parents to educate as well, and drugs is definitely an element that we put very strongly into our Let's Talk Teenagers and Let's Talk Preteens, because we feel it's really appropriate that the conversations are there. But it's the tools for parents to bring up that conversation, which isn't sit down opposite your child and say, are you taking drugs? Because you'll get a very clear answer. If you sit side by side your child and you have a conversation around drugs and social media, you might get somewhere, and you might open up those conversations. So we're really keen to work on any communities. We can also look at engaging specialist services like, for example, youth outreach. We can also have conversations with Y-Smart, which is the commission service in Devon, to pick up on issues in relation to young people. And really importantly, hopefully we'll get a really good idea of the scale of the issue, because it might not be as bad as we think. It might be recreational, or it might be. But the important thing is to know the facts, but to work with a whole community solution. As a community safety partnership, that's our real focus. We want to work with parents, but we also want to work with schools. But we also do need to do enforcement sometimes if it's appropriate. We've been working with a barrister working on behalf of Devon and Cornwall Police over the last couple of weeks at using our powers in a different way. And some of the powers that we can use are actually put enforcement notices on parents if they're encouraging antisocial behaviour of their children. That might be something we can look at. There's lots of tools in the toolkit, but it's around engagement and partnership.
Brenda's, please.
Hello again. I'm going to challenge a little bit on this, I think. You started your presentation off, and as always, it's gripping, it's fantastic, and we listen, we get buoyed up, and we're all positive. I obviously sat with you all a few weeks ago at the Dartmoor one and came out there quite positive, and went back to the community. We had a few issues there that I then got the individuals to highlight. I'm going to be very careful how I say this, because I don't want to let too much out of the bag, because there might be an ongoing investigation here, and I will get round to my question. But the information was there. My concern is going back to the county lines, going back to the drug, and going back to youth. We have had a slight problem in my ward, a growing problem of underage people using drugs. It has been brought to notice. We know where it's coming from. Trying to get people to actually stand witness has been a problem. We did, however, get a number of written, although anonymous, they wanted to remain anonymous, letters to local police, which I then had a meeting with afterwards. But nothing seemed to be done. And my question to you is, do you have enough resource that if eventually you finally get the intel that you spoke about at the beginning, and it was important that we came up with that intel, which is what we went back to do, to actually do something about it? Because this has been quite a number of weeks now. We're talking about underage, we're talking about underage youth being supplied drugs by older people. We've given an address, nothing has happened as far as I can see. I spoke to the 2 local guys to me who just said, well, it's really hard and we're working on it, and yes, it's great intel. And my argument, or my conversation with them went, well, it's all well and good, but do you know how hard it was for me to actually get these people to write to you? And suddenly there's nothing that appears to be happening. So my question is, do you have enough resource? Because that's always been a thing, do you have enough people out there? And how much priority do you put upon that kind of local information? I'm obviously in the park, I am Dartmoor, and I'm surprised that there was no letters. You said that, that since we had our meeting there was no letters issued. I would have thought there's been, as I say, with the complaints that I know that have gone through from mine, that maybe something more would have happened. So Chris, if that's probably...
Could I just take that first before to Chris?
Sorry, it was a bit long-winded, but...
Just to say, in relation to resource, obviously this is a conversation around the Community Safety Partnership. What we would like to do is exactly as we've just talked about, get a better understanding. As far as I'm aware, that hasn't come to the Community Safety Partnership. It may have been shared with police. And I just want to give a context example of something that's happened in Teambridge and how the Community Safety Partnership have been involved. We had somebody complaining to us from antisocial behaviour in quite an urban part of Newton Abbot, actually. They were concerned about the comings and going next door. We had a conversation with the police. We kept in regular communication with that member of the public. We did a survey amongst the other residents to try and get more information so that it wasn't just coming from one person, so to try and corroborate so that it's not directed at one person because of the concerns. We then had to be very sensitive about the amount of information that we could pass back to that community. There was a substantial warrant undertaken last week that was a very productive warrant and that has had a massive impact on the community. So so that's the sort of stuff that we do every day. I can't talk about your specific instance, but that hasn't come to us as Community Safety Partnership. If it had as Community Safety Partnership, we would be working with police colleagues on looking at what tools are in the arsenal. Some of those are down the criminal justice route, which I'm sure Chris will talk about. But some of those we can look at it more laterally and from a community-focused way.
Sorry, just go back, just while we can. Who would actually issue the surveys? Because there were surveys issued after there was an initial. So I know that much happened. It's just that nothing seems to have happened since. That was all. So would that be you that would issue it, or would the police? The surveys
would normally be done by the neighbourhood policing team in partnership with the Community Safety Partnership.
Which area do you cover? Just. Okay, so I can't comment specifically on certain instances. However, I can give everyone here some assurance around our resourcing, in that we have seen an increase in our resourcing in West Devon in recent months and over the last 2 years, partially because we've been able to promote some of the good work that we've done in West Devon and been able to increase our staff footprint, both in terms of patrol officers to go out and deal with 909 incidents and react to dynamic incidents as they come into our sector, as well as our neighbourhood resources. So at the moment I've got 2 adverts out for neighbourhood officers. Both happen to be in Oakhampton area because that's where we're short at the moment. But we do have proportionate staffing. We'd always like more, of course, and we would like to be able to say to you all that we'll be as proactive and visible as we possibly can. And you may have seen from both social media and from the Tavistock Matters meeting that we had recently that the ambition that I've got for West Devon sector over the coming year is that we're connected to our communities, that we're visible in our communities, and that we're on the front foot and proactive when we deal with issues. So you would have seen last week we had a warrant in Oakhampton where we seized a number of weapons and knives. A few days prior, we seized another cohort of knives from an address in Tavistock. 6 weeks ago, or earlier on this year, we conducted a drugs warrant in Sticklepath near Oakhampton, and where we get intelligence and information to say that there's drug use or illegal activity going on in an area, then I'll ask my neighbourhood teams to go out to try and gain in more information and intelligence about that. And when it meets an acceptable threshold where we can draw a warrant from a magistrate to say, we believe there's illegal activity going on at this address, then we have got the resources available to us, whether that's from our own cohort of staff or our force support groups or the major crime investigation teams which supported us in the last fortnight, that will be able to deal with those incidents. Your instance specifically, I can't comment on right now, but what I can say is when it meets that threshold, I'm determined, as is the rest of my team, to deal with those issues.
Councillor Renders, may I suggest that when this presentation is finished, you leave the meeting and perhaps have a word with Inspector Conway and Becker? Okay. Councillor Sellis, please.
Hi, thank you very much as ever. It's interesting and it's good to see you again. And thank you for attending the Tavistock Matters on the 23rd of January. And I'm glad to see that there's an increase in police presence given the increases in the police precept. So as a resident, I'm jolly glad of that. How can elected members help the police more? And another question, and I think I should know this, and I apologise, are the police involved in planning applications? For example, there might be certain developments where you could see that it would increase social interaction, or it might increase antisocial behaviour. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So, Debo, I'll take, or Councillor, I'll take your second question first, if that's okay. So, yes, we are involved in planning applications. We have a designing out crime officer that's actually a member of staff, not a sworn officer, who covers a geographic area and notifies us when there's planning applications that may be applicable for us to comment on. We did one such matter in Oakhampton just last week where we had some comments to make around the layout of the proposed development. If the designing out crime officer decides that it needs to be raised to the local team, then of course we'll comment on that as required. When it comes to what's required, how you can assist us in dealing with issues, whether that be antisocial behaviour right the way through to established criminality, the one thing that we need to continually ask you to do is not just you as elected members, but all of your parishioners and people within the areas within which you represent, is to keep reporting incidents to us. So I suspect many of you as elected members will say to me that our antisocial behaviour is an issue within our area. And I don't dispute that, but antisocial behaviour for the last 3 months compared to the year prior is down 21%. We've had 80 incidents of antisocial behaviour in the last 3 months. And actually, when you compare that to the rest of the force, the force average is around 1 incident per square mile over the last 3 months, whereas our average is 1 incident every 3.5 square miles. So what we do have in West Devon is a really pleasant, nice, lovely community that we want to keep that way and actually increase that beyond what we've got currently. And I'm really keen that if anyone can report any instance, whether that be drug use in Princetown through to antisocial behaviour in another location, then please keep reporting that to police and we'll have appropriate action.
And if I could just encourage members, utilise Claire. So if people are not sure whether to go to the police, then utilise Claire, who's in contact with police on an almost daily basis. We have partnership information sharing forms where we can submit intelligence and information to the police, which is triaged within 24 hours through the Force Intelligence Bureau and goes to the appropriate location, so we can get information direct to the police. So please do use Claire as well.
Councillor Hayworth, please.
I'm Chagford. Fernworthy raves in the summer. I can't remember who told me this, but apparently if we can contact the police early enough, once we start seeing the cars rolling through, if you can keep the number of people that have accumulated at Fernworthy under 200, then the police are prepared to move in and stop it. But if you don't get there in time, once the numbers have got over a containable, safely containable, is this nonsense or?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm a public order commander, so over 1 week in 10, I go on a rota whereby I'm the commander for any type of public order, public safety incidents across the force. This weekend, I'll be on duty in that role. And I was on duty in Davidstow last spring when we had a significant unlicensed music event there. Now, if we get there and there's already a number of thousand vehicles already in situ, then it is really difficult for us to react to that without significant resourcing implications. So this year, and I've just been in a meeting this morning for an hour, as we call it Operation D-Rig, which is a operation where we can be proactive around how we target harden those sites such as Fernworthy and other sites across West Devon to prevent them from being a target for people that run and pull together raves and unlicensed music events. And there's some proactive work that's been going on with the Forestry Commission, with Dartmoor National Park and other stakeholders and leaders for us to be able to try and ensure that we don't leave a site a target that they can go into. Now, just on Friday or Saturday last week, we had a UME in just outside of Exeter that had vehicles parked on the side of arterial routes, and we were able to close that one down and seize all of the equipment from that location on Saturday night going into Sunday morning. So please do, if you can, if you've got sites that are available or look as if they are a soft target for that type of community, please contact us. And obviously, if it's a noise issue, retrospective, we will deal if it's a UME, or it will go into environmental health if it's an ongoing issue and not just a one-off incident.
We dial 999, or what do we do?
If you see an incident ongoing now, and there's an offence happening in front of you, my advice is to always call 999. If there's something which has just happened, which you want us to be aware of, call 101. Or I would always suggest using web chat. So go online, Devon and Cornwall Police web chat. It'll be the same people that answer the phone, but they'll do it almost instantly, as opposed to you waiting for an hour to get to speak to someone.
Thank you. Councillor Spettigue, please.
Thank you. A question for you, Becca. As always, thank you for
the microphone.
Sorry, Chair, is that better?
Yeah, the ladies along here can't hear you.
My question goes back to the start of your presentation, Becca, about where you mentioned an intervention in schools with regard to misogyny and sexism, which a lot of people assume is something of the past, but the papers have recently reported the behaviours of one Mr. Tate in Bulgaria, and actually this is a man who has a global reach and appeal to millions of young men across the road, and the things he's accused of go far beyond simple misogynistic behaviours and link into a lot of the other things that come under the umbrella of your remit, such as coercion and sexual violence and things. With a character like that being so globally popular among young men, no doubt you're well aware of the risk that poses. How do you see the CSP's role changing to combat the potential fallout of the influence of people like him?
That's an incredibly good question, and it's one that keeps me awake at night. So for those of you that don't know who Andrew Tate is, he's a social influencer whose TikTok channel has had over 11 billion views of young people. Because of our networks into school, we are hearing very clearly that he is being talked about within our school environment, and he has been talked about by young men with hero status because of his wealth and because he's brave and he speaks out. That is why we're in schools, and that is why we're working with parents. In response to, we had a meeting with our schools, secondary schools, and they begged us for help. What can we do? What information can we give to young people and to parents to combat, to try and do something against this tide of uncomfortable sexism? So we sent some resources that we had out to schools instantly, and we're lobbying colleagues at Devon County to put some more resource into that. Sadly, we're also seeing offences against children as a result of changing culture, which is being influenced by media. And I'm largely talking there, members, around pornography, and that the type of pornography that's being viewed by our children is impacting on the type of violent offences we're seeing sexually against our children. So we are looking at trying to get some presentations out to schools, out to parents on the impact of pornography on the male brain. But I think the other thing that's really important to say, and I've been successful within Teambridge, unfortunately we weren't successful within South Hams or West Devon in pitching into the UK Prosperity Fund that's come out from the government, and I've got just under £250,000 in Teambridge to address violence against women and girls, and a massive focus for us on that will be building resilience in the community. That's quite uncomfortable for me as a Community Safety Partnership Chair that covers 3 districts. So I will ensure that any learning that we can get out of that funding in Teambridge and working with groups of young people will come to West Devon. So I'll be hopefully telling you about that next year. And the thing for us that's really important, again about that, and I'm boring myself now, is we take a whole community approach. We can't do this by victimising men and making men, putting all the blame on men and young women. We need to do this as a whole community, and we need to work with young men around how they can call out negative behaviour and how they can be positive role models to other young men. In the same way as we can get women to challenge that behaviour in young women. So it is the area of my work that keeps me awake at night, because unfortunately, not only do we see that in social media, we are seeing it manifest in harm on children in the way that they're presenting at the Sexual Assault Referral Centre. And I'm quite hardened in this role, but some of the information and the data that I'm seeing there is really concerning. So it's a real focus for us around social media, influencers, and really focusing on positivity, building resilience in our communities.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, go on, Councillor Pearce.
No, mine's not a question, Chairman. Mine's a plea to my fellow councillors here that they endeavour to attend the West Devon North and West Devon South meetings. The recent West Devon South meeting was the attendance was diabolical, and it's not fair on Claire or the police inspector. They give up their time in the evening and nobody bothers to turn up. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from anyone else? No. I personally, and this is a bit of a plea from me, because I've always been heavily invested in the Community Safety Partnership. And I have to say that I often feel that West Devon and South Hams, to a degree, because we've always worked with them and shared joint officers, that we don't seem as a council to take community safety partnerships as seriously as Teambridge do. And I have felt that very strongly. I think it's because we probably feel much safer where we live in West Devon, and it won't happen here. Becca has sent me an email today that really shocked me to have to read. And, you know, I said to her, in this area, you'd never think to hear about it. But when we had the problems with jihadis and things like that, there were training camps on Dartmoor, and we had somebody come to us from the police who specialises in this role, and I think someone from the forces as well came, didn't they? And showed us some of the things that people rent these cottages on Dartmoor, so probably in cosy little places in the Chagford ward, because they're off the beaten track, these holiday places, and they are training people. But, you know, living here, you would never think it happens until to train them to be terrorists.
So would it be helpful if I expanded, Councillor Ewings? So one of the challenges that we have, and it was mentioned briefly in my report, but I can't cover everything, is around radicalisation and people becoming radical to extremism. Sadly, that is not just an inner city, big urban conurbation challenge. So Claire, on your behalf, sits on panels where we work with young people or adults who we've got concerns about and are vulnerable to radicalisation. That happens in West Devon, that happens in South Hams, it happens in every district across the country. One of the things that Councillor Ewings is making reference to is I disseminated some information about a right-wing organisation, an extreme right-wing organisation called Patriotic Alternative, which has got a lot of support across other areas of Europe, and they have had camps on Dartmoor where they are coming together under all sorts of different guises. Unfortunately, some organisations have got on the back of environmental causes to try and identify people with extremist views who they then channel that into radicalisation in relation to things like immigration, white supremacy, and unfortunately within the southwest we do, and within Devon, we do have significant concerns in relation to extreme right-wing concerns. So it's called Preventing Radicalisation, and the Prevent agenda is part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy. Claire and I are your Prevent leads, and we work with colleagues across the county, across the constabulary, and we're part of Devon-wide partnerships to try and address that. So for us, again, our approach is around, if our communities are resilient, if we look after each other and we look after the most vulnerable in our societies, then we will be much more resilient to radicalisation.
Just wondering whether you do anything about speaking to people that have homes that are, being rented out, to say, watch out, keep an eye out for this happening.
So we do use things like our forum to try and contact people. I've got, in March, I'm meeting with a load of holiday camp owners across the Teignbridge area. If you've got any types of organisations that are bringing people together in any group, we're always really happy to come and speak around a whole host of community safety issues. This is one of them, but I'd also like to talk to them about child sexual exploitation if I've got them in the room. I'd also like to talk to them about modern slavery and human trafficking, and I'm absolutely sure that there's a whole host of things that Chris would like to speak to them about. Some of them will be the same things and we'll do a double act, and some will be Claire. We're really happy to speak to any group or organisation that comes together around these sorts of risks that face our communities.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sellis and then Councillor Radcliffe, and that's it for questions then, please. Oh, and Councillor Richards. You may, but I'll just come back to you, okay?
Well, actually, Madam Chairman, I was just wondering whether I could make a recommendation that West Devon Borough councillors are updated more regularly about issues associated with the Community Safety Partnership. Some of the information that I've received today has not shocked me, regrettably, but it's upset me as a county councillor and as a borough councillor and as a resident. And I am concerned that we have heard the chairman say that she feels that the councils at South Hams and at West Devon have not seemed to put as much emphasis as she feels that we should. So I would support you there, Chairman, and I firmly believe that all the elected members, though painful, we do actually need to know certain things. Now, I would not go into nitty-gritty when these are being publicised. I think confidentiality and residents knowing that we are critical friends, not criticising and demonising. So I don't know if that needs a seconder, or if everybody agrees that we, as the overview and scrutiny, recommend that councillors, West Devon Borough Council, get more updates. I don't know how you factor that, because clearly it is a very sensitive subject, but this is happening. And what really terrifies me is I can't recognise who these poor kids are.
So, if I may, Chair, just to say that we've had this conversation at previous overview and scrutinies. We have a really short period of time, and I appreciate there's other officers sitting in here who need to speak, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So what we have done in this chamber is we've done like a 2.5-hour session for members where we can go into detail. We will give you a data protection statement and information sharing statement at the end, and that way we can give you a bit more detail. I've been very careful about what I've said today, and I would love to give you some more reality. And that, being really, really clear, is not about frightening you. It's not about escalating fear, but it is about being realistic. And there is a real ease to go, I grew up in West Devon, I'm a West Devon girl. It's a lovely, fluffy, safe place to live. And it is, but we want to keep it that way. And the only way we can keep it that way is if we put the same safeguards in for West Devon as Plymouth have got, as Exeter have got, because these sorts of risks are mobile and not confined to urban areas. So if that's suitable and members would be interested, I'm sure Chris would and his officers would work with Claire and I to pull together a couple of hours seminar, and then we would love to go into real detail.
If I may, thank you very much.
Can I just add to that? I just want to ensure that we leave here with a proportionate view on what's happening in West Devon, and we are the safest sector within Devon and Cornwall. When we look at us in comparative to similar areas within the rest of the country, so similar in terms of size is West Midlands Police, and we have 200 crimes, 200 times the amount of 200 times less crime than West Midlands do per square mile. So we are genuinely one of the safest places we can possibly live. But that's because of the work of the CSP, the police and the wider agencies, and we shouldn't not invest in those areas just because we feel we're a safe area. We should ensure that we continue to beat that drum and ensure that we keep us as safe a place as possible.
Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chair. I've experienced in one of my councils, the council decided that they will permit an LGBT flag to be flown from the town hall, which is a good democratic thing which we support, because of course that has now opened up a can of worms, and there's offensive articles because coming in the press, the flags are being removed, offensive calls to the town clerk, which I believe the police are dealing with. But this is something which is really outside my understanding of when this happens. It's particularly upsetting because the headmistress of the school has done a tremendous amount of work in really helping the children in the middle school to understand this problem to go on. And of course that then drags them into it when this stupidity comes from the press and what's been circulated around the town. I would very much welcome a discussion of this with Claire outside the meetings. This is not the place to have it, but I just would like to know if this is happening in other of our towns.
It happened in Tavistock. It caused resignations, it caused all sorts. So yes, Tavistock are very wise to it. So thank you for that, Councillor Radcliffe. And I know that would come up in the discussion if we booked the 2.5-hour talk. So I know that one would be there. Ridges.
Thank you. Right, I've switched this on. First, a question for the Inspector. Do you think it's fair that we should actually compare us and the West Midlands on square miles as we have Dartmoor? Should we probably be going on heads of population?
No, so we can do that if you like. So I haven't got West Midlands numbers here, but I can say that per 1,000 population, we've got 40 crimes in West Devon, whereas the rest of the force area, the next lowest is 48. Going up to Plymouth, that's 81. So whichever metric you'd like to use, I can assure you that we are very much in the most safe category. I haven't run the numbers across the country, but I can do that over both metrics. However, I do feel that the fear of crime, I live within a mile of a serious crime which has occurred within Bodnley, up in West Devon, just in the last couple of days. And I think that crime doesn't matter how many people will live within a condensed area. If there's a crime that's within a mile of you, I think it matters. And I don't necessarily like the metrics of the numbers around population, because I don't think that gives a fair representation of the amount of crime which occurs within a large rural area such as ours, which is why I use that metric at the start.
Okay, that's absolutely fair enough. It's just there's a lot of sheep up there and not a lot of people. And the other question is, I chair the Visit Devon Marketing Committee and I'm on the board. We've got a meeting tomorrow. And one thing we'd be particularly concerned, because we represent an enormous amount of owners of self-catering cottages, can I have some information ASAP on people who are coming to rent properties potentially for setting up training camps? Because I think this would be really, really interesting to circulate to our members, and we can get that out tomorrow, if that is at all possible, without scaring people, because we are a low-crime area, and I think that is worth saying. And
could I make a suggestion, if I may, Chair, that at your next meeting we'll come and talk about it rather than just give some information, because I would like to do it proportionately. And if there is capacity to do that at a future meeting, I would absolutely love to engage with that group, but I'd like to do it in a really meaningful way that is proportionate of our local risk. So I would want to work with Chris on that rather than just send you some merchandise. Is that okay?
yes, I can understand. I suppose that might put the fear of whatever into them, renting their properties. Thanks.
That would be great, because then you've got Becca at the right forum that you chair, and probably a much better way. Right, having listened to everything, members, our recommendation for today is that the committee identifies any issues to be raised at the next Community Safety Partnership meeting. But I'd like to sort of have two on there, and that would be that the ONS committee identifies the need for a Community Safety Partnership seminar to be held in the new council. How do you all feel about that? Yeah. I'm looking at the leader.
Chair, I'd be very happy with that proposal. I would add that one of the plans that we're making at the moment
in the induction
to bring parish councils more into the discussion with us as well is to run something along the lines of a West Devon conference, for want of a better description, sometime later in the year, to which other agencies, in particular the police and the CSP, would be invited as one of the participants, and perhaps that could be a good forum to extend the message wider as well.
Yeah, that's lovely, but would Becca get 2.5 hours at your... Yeah, no, he's nodding, so I'm going with that. So, members, are you all happy with that second? Oh, Councillor Pearce.
I have concerns that it would be watered down if we have too many people attending a parish and town council meeting. I think, you know, Becca has made it quite clear, and I mean, she's done incredible work over the years in West Devon and South Hams. And picking up on what Councillor Sellers said earlier, I mean, the thing that horrified me was when we battled probably getting on for 10 years ago now, to get the funding to keep things ticking over. And it was like drawing hen's teeth. And it was very evident then that members of that time did not appreciate the work that the Community Safety Partnership did. And I think that's what we have to be aware of in the future.
That's where I was going with my...
Sorry.
With my previous comment, that we don't take it seriously, because getting money from the budget has always been a total nightmare for this council. And I know that Mr Luscombe does try hard for us when budgets are up and everything. But it is a realisation that we have to accept, and particularly the work that the Community Safety Partnership is doing around young people. You know, to have, what was it, 4,000, Becca, in total? 3,000 odd parents. But we also, those are parents that we know that logged in. We don't know how many people were sat in that sitting room. So they could have had their neighbours or whatever. So, you know, it could have easily reached much further. So if everybody's happy with that recommendation, Councillor Spettigue, is it relevant? Because she now really has gone over time.
It is, Chair. Just a quick point, and that is that whilst West Devon is a wonderful place, and it is a place where my family and I feel really safe, as the threats and the risks for young people change, the way to keep it that way is to keep investing in the Community Safety Partnership.
Thank you for that. Councillor Jury.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I think the Council does take this issue seriously. That doesn't mean there's not room to take it even more seriously. I think your description of trying to get money from the Council as being a total nightmare is perhaps a little unfair. If you cast your mind back, in 2021 we were asked for some additional money for the Community Safety Partnership, amounting to around about 21,250, and we provided it without a huge amount of debate, to be honest.
I'm going a bit further back when we had more staff. So anyway, that's past whatever. We've got members who wish to support. So is everybody happy to have a vote on that item now with the second recommendation in the read the seminar? All hands in favour, please. There we go. Thank you very much. Thank you, Claire, Becca and Chris. Very informative as ever and just brilliant. So thank you very much. And I think Councillor Renders is going to go outside and talk. Okay. Right, moving on, we now have item 8, which is the Council delivery against corporate theme, being community wellbeing and economy. We have Councillor Leach online and Mr Luscombe in the chamber. So it's going to be a double act by the look of it.
Yes.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Leach.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. I'll try not to keep you too long. The last two speakers have been extremely interesting. So, strengthening community well-being. The executive summary, as shows in the reports, basically says the Council adopted the plan for West Devon in September 2021, alongside a detailed thematic delivery plans for each priority area. I will actually pass over to Mr Luscombe to fill in the finer points, but I was just going to say a couple of words. And this is about the rural poverty scheme, which is part of the first part of the schematic. As everyone knows, we've had the cost of living crisis upon us, so that particular piece of work had to be put on hold. But what it has shown, because of the amount of work that's been put into the cost of living crisis, is actually provided us with a lot of crucial information that can and will feed into the pilot process, which should start again very soon. Mrs. Kirsty Smith, and I must say welcome to West Devon to Kirsty, who is our new public health officer, will be leading on this. The cost of living crisis has proved time-consuming for everyone, and I'd like to personally thank all those concerned in getting the grants and the help out to those in need so swiftly. I don't think I need to remind everybody that the same staff have to provide the same level of service to the two authorities, which for me, that's a great achievement on its own. So, not to waste any more time, can I pass over to Mr Luscombe to fill in the finer points?
Thank you, Councillor Leach. Can you hear me, members? I'll try again. Can you hear me, members? Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Leach, for that introduction. The report is in front of you, and also is the delivery plan, with some updates against each of the actions. May I, Chair, just very quickly go through each of those actions to give a little bit of further explanation. Councillor Leach has already talked about the Rural Poverty Pilot Project. We are looking to get that back on track with the introduction of my colleague, Kirsty Smith, who sat over there, who gave us a wave just now. She's joined us with great experience from Public Health Department in Torbay. The aim of the project is what we're learning as we go, really. It is really breaking new ground in terms of something that I, having worked at the council for some time, haven't been involved in previously. But this is really about trying to understand the community, the existing community assets and how the community work and how they support the community, and to try to make sure that we as a council are supporting those existing community leaders and those existing groups to reach the widest sort of audience that they can and support the most number of people that they can. What we've also found is that through doing some research with Devon County Council colleagues is that the public health evidence leads us to some really interesting evidence that actually it's young people who are mostly affected by rural poverty in that area. And so that what we want to do is to try and to focus on our learning by speaking to those young people and find out how it is affecting them firsthand, and then think about what support we can draw into the area through the existing assets that we've got there to try and support them. What we would like to do is to provide some feedback to the council and the members over the next 12 months to tell you what we've been able to deliver in terms of some real life stories of how we've been able to support people and community groups. And I'd also like to present back to you the finding of actually doing the project. It is a pilot project, so it's all about finding out new ways of doing things. And it's really interesting, some of the research that we've been doing to understand how councils can best position themselves in the communities. And I've heard a lot about communities already this afternoon from other speakers, but how we can position ourselves in the best way in those communities to provide the best amount of support, which may lead us on to how we can, support not just in rural poverty, but in other work that we do at the council. Through you, Chair, can I go on to the next action, or would you like to take sort of questions now for that one?
Mr. Luscombe, I'm really sorry, you may not have got the memo, but you were limited to 15 minutes.
How many have we had, Chair?
10.
I'll be fast. I'll take it.
That's to include questions.
Okay. So the only other thing that I would say then is looking at the action CW 1.3, which is the delivery of projects to enable residents to continue to live safely within their own homes. This is mainly about our disabled facilities grants, but I wanted really to bring this to life a bit for members and just give you a little bit of commentary on 3 of the grants which we've done in the last 12 months. One was for a child who wasn't able to access the family home, 11-year-old girl, and the family opted with our grant assistance to create a bigger extension with a bathroom and a bedroom downstairs for the young person to get access to. The works are now fully completed and provided the client with a suitable wheelchair access to her family home with a fully accessible bedroom and bathroom, and the family were very pleased with the outcome and said it was a life-changing adaptation which has been put in place for that family. Another on the feedback form for a grant that we did said, bear with me a second, that we provided a very prompt and efficient service while providing a stairlift adaptation, and they put on actually on the feedback form that they appreciated the funding and that had allowed them to stay in their own home and how grateful they were for that. And another one was where a person had lived in a property for 60 years and had become elderly within that property, didn't have any hot water or heating for about 8 of the last year, for 8 years previous, and could no longer manage to carry the wood to the Rayburn. And they've been surviving off electric heaters and washing with hot water from a kettle for the last 8 years. Once we provided the grant, the lady had access to a level access shower, was able to bathe all the time every day, and had hot water provided to the kitchen as well. So just through those 3 examples, You know, makes such a difference. It's a statistic in some respects, but actually the stories behind some of these statistics are really powerful. And I just wanted to share that with you this afternoon. And I think I've probably used up my time, Chair.
You have, but I would like to congratulate you for having all 7 areas on track. And when people read the report, there's really a lot of good work that's been done with funding that's been provided. Disabled facility grants always have a really complex backstory, and I know you've had to sort of gabble 3 out, but I can imagine how tough it's been for those families and the difference that the grant has had that is provided by Devon County and comes through to us, and we manage each of our grants individually, is excellent work, so thank you. Does anybody have any questions? I see some. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick one, actually. The development of new playing pitch strategy, action CW 1.4, will that involve any grant funding going to the sports clubs?
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. I'm glad you mentioned that one. So the funding, I believe some of it comes through the Section 106 funding, and other funding is drawn down from other organisations. The report features a lot of work being done in Tavistock, because that's at the stage where it could be brought forward to be put into the report. Can I also assure members that there's other work going on, for example, in the Oakhampton area, working with the Town Council, Okra and local councillors around playing facilities, and also there's a new facility just been announced that's going into Phyllis Park in Horrobridge, where I believe they've got funding from the Community Ownership Fund for a new pavilion. So there is various bits of funding that are brought together through that strategy to enable many of these projects to go ahead.
Could I have a supplementary, Chair, please? Is that on top of the S106 monies?
I don't know the answer to that. I can come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. And we are asked to note the progress in delivering against the plan for West Devon Community Wellbeing Thematic Delivery Plan. Is everybody happy to note? Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Luscombe. Thank you, Councillor Leach. Right, moving on to item 9. I can't see Councillor Crozier, so I assume it's just going to be Mr. Shears presenting this. Yes? No? No?
No.
No. So, did anybody have any questions on the Thriving Economy update, their thematic report? Let's just get back down to it a minute. I'm still in the other one. No. Right. I'm sorry about this, members. Do you want me to defer this one to the next meeting?
I think we can defer this item.
Yeah. Is everybody happy to defer? Because we've got nobody to answer any questions or anything else. So we will defer item 9, and we've now caught up. So item 10 would Mr. Powell, Mr. Williams and Ms. Wood. Are you staying there, Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Yes. What is it with senior officers today wanting to stay there?
It's development for our next level down officers, actually.
It's empowerment.
Yeah.
Right. Adam, you okay to go? And Lucy?
Okay, thank you, yeah. So presenting the EV strategy to everyone today. So this is a draft strategy we've been working on for a couple of months now. Is that better? Okay. So yeah, we know kind of transport emissions are quite tricky to deal with in rural areas. So an electrified transport system is part of that answer. But we obviously know the technology and behaviour patterns of people changing all the time. So this is why the strategy casts a bit of a 2-year horizon for that strategy. And we are looking to work a bit more closely with Devon County Council. So Devon County Council consulted on their EV strategy last year. And part of that outcome of that strategy was to have a bit more collaborative arrangement with districts and other authorities, put together bid applications to increase the resiliency of the EV charging network in Devon, but also to make it a bit more accessible. So one of the main things that was brought out in the strategy was that whilst the public sector, the private sector will invest quite heavily in EV charging up until 2030, a lot of that's going to be in heavily densely populated areas. So it's going to be up to local authorities to improve that resiliency in rural areas where there might not be the appetite for a private sector to come in and put those charges in. So like I said, the EV strategy is a 2-year project, and one of the main actions we were looking at in the first 2 years is to kind of lead by example, to swap our fleet over to electric and improve the EV charging facilities for our own fleet. And also to do a bit of horizon scanning to work with landowners and county to find out where those hotspots are around the area where we might be able to work with Devon County to put bids in to install EV chargers in rural locations.
Thanks, Adam. I think you've said it all, haven't you? Well done. So, any questions? I think just from me to note the work that has gone into the EV strategy and the challenges that there have been around it, because we're working with Devon County Council on this, and we're sort of beholden, if you like, to their plan and the Devon Carbon Plan and everything else. So we have to work in collaboration. But I think, having said that, this is a great example of collaborative work where we now have a view of moving forward. And what we want from this afternoon is to sort of have that go ahead for Adam. I was going to say Adam and his team, but I think it's just you, isn't it? To do a consultation on sort of where the charges might be in rural locations. Thank you.
Councillor Daniel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me? I just wanted an update on progress with the chargers in our car parks, because that's been going on now for quite a while, and I wonder where we are with that. Thank you.
We are a bit behind on those charges for various different reasons relating to way leaves. Emma did put a note in a members' bulletin a couple of weeks ago laying out what those delays are and where the forecasting time is for those at the moment, so I would have to defer your attention to that.
Thank you for that, Adam. Next question is from Councillor Southcott, please.
Good afternoon. One of the things that seems to be a problem around the West Country is the amount of electricity required for the charging points. Has there been any consideration to using solar panels, battery storage to boost the capacity in those areas?
Yes, that's a really good point. So the new funding mechanism for EV charging at the moment has been replaced. So at the moment, the government has done the off-street residential charging scheme, which is now finished. The new one is called the levy scheme, which is the local electric vehicle infrastructure scheme. And what they're looking for through that scheme is big projects. So they want lots of sites, but they also want innovative things. So things like solar canopies, battery storage, so we can get around that resiliency issue with the grid.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce now.
Mine actually follows on from Councillor Daniel, because what has occurred working collaboratively with Devon County Council is that our electric EV points are at a standstill, and it's ridiculous. I just hope that going forward, that any future working will be done much more professionally and swiftly than what we've seen so far. One thing I would ask is that with everyone moving now to electronic working and with electric charging points and everything, there's likely to be times when the power supply will not cope with the demand. Is that being taken into account?
So yeah, that's a fair point. So what the national strategy for electricity demand at the moment is looking at, we need to be moving to a bit more of a smarter energy system, and this is one of the main reasons why smart meters have been rolled out so heavily, so the grid can monitor where those peaks are and tweak demand, adjusting to people's patterns. So yeah, absolutely, there probably will be times where the grid needs to be reinforced a lot more, but there are things going on in the background in terms of how the grid actually works in a much more smart way rather than the way it's worked at the moment.
It's also commercial working, isn't it? That's taking up a lot of power now, which is the use is growing month on month, and this is a concern nationally, is how we're going to provide the power needed in 5 years' time.
Was that a question or a comment?
It was a comment.
Thank you.
I must say, Chairman, I'm, you know, I was lead member for communities when we started putting the EV charging points in, and it was agreed, you know, nearly 3 years ago that we would do this. The units are all there, and you know, we're just being made to look a fool within the community, that they're all sheeted down, and everybody is asking why it's not happening.
Councillor Southcott, I think that might be some money towards Councillor Mott's mayoral fund. Councillor Kimber, please, next.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a question followed by, with a follow-up question, please? So I think Co-Cars were proposing to run a car share scheme in a rural area. Do you know if that happened?
So I think you might have been referring to, we did do a survey with Co-Cars last year. So what that found is that there was appetite, but there's not enough for them just to come in and set something up because they need income to be able to drive that service. So it will be something that if we wanted to go down that road, we'd have to fund a trial so they could get the cars in and then build up the membership from that.
So
Can I just say that the 4 o'clock meeting that Councillor Radcliffe needs to be at, Councillor Leach and Councillor Mott, thank you very much for coming along to this meeting, but I know you now will need to go for your meeting that was at 4 o'clock, and I don't know whether any officers here need to go.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Kimber.
So the report is really interesting, and I'd like to spend more time looking at it. We are talking about the electrical vehicle strategy, aren't we? So it says things like West Devon faces very specific challenges, and challenges involved with rural transport are vast and well documented. And there's a risk that more rural locations are left behind, and that the majority of emissions are generated by the most affluent citizens, and the highest income group has more than 3 times the household emissions of the lowest income group. So there's quite a lot of benefits for chargers, really, because that'll be the higher income group will be impacted most by that. But I'm really interested. I went to a Rural Services Network meeting a couple of weeks ago, and it said net zero policies are not rural approved and solutions are not affordable in rural areas. So I presume they're talking about the less affluent households. So I'm really interested to know, is there a way we can focus more on rural transport for our less affluent citizens with the aim of reducing carbon? And is there an opportunity for members to get involved with that process? Because it's so important, I think.
Just had a follow-up to what Councillor Kimber's just said. Can we not have some of these EV charging points as something like some of the rural village halls where, you know, local members who are not as affluent and everything else can actually just go to the village hall that holds a point? Have we looked at that option?
This is exactly what I was hoping to come out with through. So one of the main actions in the strategy is to call for sites. We did a soft one last Christmas, and there was some appetite for some villagers who wanted to offer their land up for EV charging. So what I'm hoping to do is to run that exercise, get a big list of candidates who might want to have EV charging on their sites, village halls, parish car parks, and then we can package those up as a group of sites to apply for that levy fund with Devon County Council. And what we're understanding from government is that to make those sites more viable, so those village hall sites, they're going to need to be packaged up with more viable sites, because we're not going to be able to be in a position where we're going to run the charges ourselves. We're going to need a private sector partner to help deliver those. But again, they're going to need to make it stack up in viability terms for them. So if we package up those more profitable ones will offset the less profitable ones in village hall car parks.
On the list.
So, thank you, Chair. And this is only an observation. There was something, I think, in one of the national press adverts, and it was one of the car manufacturers linking up with the national parks in terms of aiming to put charging points within the national parks. Now, it was only at that level. It didn't go into detail about when, where, whatever, but I think manufacturers of electric vehicles now are realising they need to actually do something towards the infrastructure. So one of the things that we can certainly do is talk to Dartmoor National Park to see what they're doing and whether they're part of this partnership.
Can I try my question again? So this is an electric vehicle strategy which will help the more affluent members of more affluent residents, and it will have a big impact on carbon because they emit 3 times the amount of carbon. But we've talked in this report a lot about rural transport. Is there any opportunity for us to talk about car sharing, active travel, cycling between local settlements, 20-minute neighbourhoods, that kind of thing? Where should we be having that conversation?
Absolutely. So you are quite right. Obviously, the more affluent members of society can afford electric cars at the moment. They are still quite prohibitively expensive. That will come down over time, but we can't do anything to influence that. But we need to look at the transport system as a whole and not just look at cars. I mean, we did pick up that in the strategy a little bit, and that's where we touched on e-bike trials and touched on car sharing. Obviously, we will be developing a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan through the Shared Prosperity Fund. So these two strategies need to talk to each other. And I absolutely do agree, yes, we do need to look at other modes of decarbonised transport that less affluent people to be able to afford. So things like car share and bike share.
I guess the thing is, Councillor Councillor Kimber, this afternoon, is we're looking specifically at the EV charging policy, and I think, you know, that those are really sort of nice big conversations that are happening with everything else, but today, you know, we just sort of have to hone down on, you know, we do need an EV charging policy, and, you know, will the ONS committee accept this, and can we move on to the next part, which is the really important and probably a slightly more exciting part of doing that, you know, looking around for places where these can go with all the complications that Mr. Williams has talked about.
Councillor Spetsky, and then Councillor Salis, and then, is it you, Councillor Moyes? Yes, I just wanted to answer. Oh, go on then. You can go first.
Yes, Alex Gandy at National Park was dealing with all this sort of thing. He is, however, standing in for someone who's currently left, so he's sort of gone up a temporary grade. So I'm not quite sure how far we've got with it now.
Councillor Spetsky.
Thank you, Chair. On the basis that encouraging people to use non-fossil... On the basis that encouraging people to use electric cars is deemed as a way of reducing carbon emissions over a period of time, once the vehicles achieve carbon neutrality, which it will, then I think the car manufacturers have already recognised that making it as convenient as possible to use them is what encourages people to buy them, which is why the fastest charging network in Europe is a partnership between the biggest car manufacturers. Stands to reason. So when you install, or when charging points are installed in destinations, for instance, towns or villages, where people are likely to go for a couple of hours rather than for an 8-hour working day, for instance, with particular reference to short-stay car parks and things. Is there an argument that by making those charging points DC and as fast as possible will encourage people to use them as much as possible and therefore will increase their use, shorten the time it takes for them to pay for themselves, the charging points that is, and also increases footfall around the destinations, the village halls and the towns in which they're placed?
Yeah, really fair point. So what I would say to that is, yes, absolutely, we want those fastest charges to go in to decrease the dwell time. But there are instances when people are happy to leave a car for a few hours because they might be going out to a town centre or something like that. But then we also need to balance it out onto the actual how much demand that's going to place on the grid. So a bank of 24 kilowatt chargers are going to put much more demand on a grid than 3 7-kilowatt chargers, so these will need to be balanced up. But and the grid reinforcement issues changed a little bit now as well. So from the 1st of April, we won't need to pay any connection charges anymore to connect to reinforce the grid now. But what that's going to mean is timescales for delivery is going to be much greater because National Grid are going to get much more applications to connect to it. But in speaking with them, what they do, what is helpful is if we can let them know ahead of time what sort of sites we're looking at, where and what, so they can plan in their future energy scenarios. So when we do actually want to connect, they know about it, they've thought about it already, rather than just getting a request late in the day.
Councillor Sellis, last one, please.
Thank you very much. Are you looking into issues where it's the demographics? So many people seem to retire here, and I don't think, being realistic, they necessarily want to be going on bicycles, whether they're electric or what. So are we looking into securing really useful buses and other transports, EV charging things? Because I'm sure, just looking at the demographics and where I live, I mean, Fairdues, they're quite old, but I don't think that they'd be too willing to go on bikes. They've got lots of them go around in chargeable mobility scooters. So I suppose if we can get those, a fleet of those as well, that might be useful as a council.
Can I just bring in, on behalf of the team, your question, Councillor Sellis, is more at the active programme that they're going to be looking at, not within this strategy, I've just been advised.
Oh, right, for EV vehicles and charging. I would suggest it's all linked.
Councillor Sellis, are you talking about EV charging for public transport like buses and that kind of thing?
I think we've got to, because I just can't see with the demographics of people retiring here, and you're trying to encourage everybody to walk and cycle. Well, great, I mean, I'm not discussing whether I'm for, against or what, it's just the practicalities of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely, I understand your question, and I think we're just still waiting for the technology to catch up a bit there. One of the sort of central government strategies, I think it was last year, they stopped investing in or giving discounts for electric cars and discounts for home chargers, and they were going to be putting that money much more into technology and looking at the infrastructure. And I guess, we've had that sort of lack of investment in all of that, but it's just sort of starting to come down, because it's all gone around a bit. And appreciate Councillor Pearce's frustration on how slow this is going, but sometimes that's a reflection on how complex the issues are, and we don't have all of the answers quite yet, particularly on those sort of bigger vehicles. When we look at our own fleets of vehicles, they're just not going to be able to go for very long, and then they're going to need a big old charge, and then they're going to be, parked in a big bus station in Bedford Square, aren't they? Anyway.
Molyneux.
Only just reflecting that as an electric car owner, whilst we're focusing here on West Devon, this is actually a national issue. You go to the motorway service stations, and the one at Taunton has one electric charging point. So this is not a unique issue to West Devon. This is still a national issue. So I would recommend to members that, they accept this as a real step forward, but this is a national issue and we're trying to sort of push the boundaries on as well. So that's all I would say from my observations driving around the country, or not.
Right, so members, may I ask that pardon? Councillor Daniel. And I know Councillor Wood needs to run away to this other meeting.
So just a quick suggestion that what we need is a vision for an integrated transport system across West Devon, not just talk about electric vehicles, or not just talk about active travel, or not just talk about our new railway stations, but how are they going to join up so that everybody has access to where they need to go. And I'd really like to see it more a wider vision than just looking at where we can put EV chargers, because that just serves a small section of the community, and we need to think of everybody being able to get around as easily as possible. Thank you.
That's very true, and well done. Mr Williams, are the council looking at, when you talk about an integrated travel plan, you think of somewhere like Birmingham and London and Manchester. You don't think about West Devon. But are we looking at something like that? I know we're looking with the train station to how you can get, back to Tavy from the Oakhampton and everything else. But are we actually looking at an integrated system?
I think we should, absolutely. The action in the corporate strategy was to develop an EV strategy, which is what we've done, and that's why this has come before you. But I think tackling transport emissions in a rural area is going to need an integrated solution, because it's so difficult just to throw electric cars at a problem in a rural area when there's so many other issues in terms of having people equitable and fair access to where they need to go based on their income and their ability to move around. This is why we need to be thinking about things like mobility hubs, and Oakhampton train station is probably going to be one of the first in West Devon, where you've got someone arriving on a train, then if they can get on a bike to get onto a bus and move around in lots of different ways rather than just their own kind of car. So I think it's definitely something we should be looking into.
On you, please.
I was just going to say what Adam just said then. We're calling it an Oakhampton travel hub, I think, rather than train station. And as members will know, the conversations about Oakhampton train station have been going on way before I joined the council. So it takes a long time, but I think we're making steps in the right direction. But I absolutely agree with Councillor Daniel in terms of the ambition, but it takes a lot of lobbying and a long time and a lot of funding. So, but this is a small step and a small part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm really sorry, but no more questions. So, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommend the content of the draft EV strategy to the Hub Committee, and that officers be requested to undertake a public consultation in line with the Council's consultation and engagement strategy. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Wood. Thank you, Mr Williams. You need to run to your next meeting. Right, the next item is task and finish groups, and we have nothing to report. And then we have the annual work programme to look at. As we know, I had suggested that the 21st of March be the last meeting before the elections, and that if the April meeting was cancelled due to Purdah and everything else. So looking through that work programme with the task and finish groups, I would hope that Mr. White has finished the induction programme, so we can sign that one off at this committee. We will have Fusion and their annual report, so the Fusion officers will be at the meeting with Mr. Parkinson. The thematic for that meeting is homes with Mrs. Blake, and then we will have the ONS annual report that will come out, and the customer access strategy and contact centre review with Mr Molyneux and Mr Davis. Does anyone else have anything? Oh, didn't see your finger.
Sorry.
Go on.
Sorry, Chair. Well, we deferred the item from Councillor Crozier on economy. So, I mean, my suggestion would be, and there's a bit of self-interest in there, that we have the economy theme as well as the homes theme, and along with the fusion report, that's 3 fairly weighty items with the ONS annual report, and bearing in mind that the customer access strategy and contact centre review went to hub committee 2 meetings ago.
Yeah.
Do we need to have that if you want to? Depends how long you want the meeting to run.
Right.
Chair.
I think how do members feel if we take that one out, and for whoever's leading on ONS after the election, that item will go forward for the next council? How does everybody feel about that? You're all quite happy with that, and for the economy to come back. Okay then, everyone. Thank you very much for that. The members' learning and development opportunities has clearly been around customer.
Climate change.
Community safety partnership. I couldn't think who I was thinking of. And that those ideas with the seminar, etc., will be put forward for the next council. And I declare the meeting closed. Thank you all very much. I knew we'd be over.